The morning sun filtered through the thick canopy of the Amazon rainforest as Jake Morrison checked his camera traps for the third time that week. Sweat dripped from his forehead as he moved quietly through the dense undergrowth, careful not to disturb the natural sounds of the jungle. Birds called from high above, and somewhere in the distance a howler monkey announced its presence to the world. Jake had been studying jaguar behavior in this remote part of Brazil for 6 months now. The local villagers had warned him about this area, telling stories of a massive black caiman they called El Diablo. According to their tales, the beast was over 20 feet long and had killed several people over the years. Jake took their warnings seriously, but he needed to be here. The jaguars in this region showed unique hunting patterns that could change everything scientists knew about big cat behavior. High above the Earth's atmosphere, something much stranger was happening. The sleek research vessel Nexus Dawn moved silently through space, its hull gleaming like polished metal against the black void. Inside the ship, Captain Kethvar stood before a large viewing screen, his insect-like eyes studying the blue and green planet below. Initial scans complete, Captain, reported Dr. Zyftal, the ship's xenobiologist. Her crystalline body sparkled as she moved, each step creating tiny musical chimes. The planet shows signs of primitive life, carbon-based organisms mostly harmless. The dominant species appears to be bipedal mammals with limited technology. Captain Kethvar clicked his mandibles in what passed for a smile among his people. The Zephyrians had been exploring space for thousands of years, cataloging life on countless worlds. Earth looked like just another routine survey mission. What about predators? Asked Scout Vexithin, a young Valdan whose crystal skin glowed with nervous energy. This was his first deep space mission, and he wanted to impress his superiors. Nothing significant, Dr. Zyftal replied, reviewing her data. Some large reptiles, a few cat-like creatures, nothing that poses any real threat to a properly equipped survey team. The local fauna appears quite primitive compared to what we've encountered on other worlds. The fourth member of their team, Coordinator Null Weep, floated nearby in his containment suit. As a gaseous nether, he needed special equipment to interact with solid matter. His voice came through the suit's speakers in a wispy, echoing tone. The electromagnetic readings suggest minimal industrial development. This civilization is probably centuries away from space travel. Captain Kethvar made his decision. Prepare a landing party. We'll conduct a standard biological survey and collect samples. This should be a simple mission. An hour later, their small shuttle broke through Earth's atmosphere and descended toward the Amazon rainforest. The aliens had chosen this location because their scans showed high biodiversity and minimal human presence. They wanted to study the planet's ecosystem without interference from the local inhabitants. Jake was examining fresh jaguar tracks when the sky above him suddenly filled with a strange humming sound. He looked up to see something that made his blood run cold. A metallic craft unlike anything he had ever seen was descending through the trees. It landed in a small clearing about 50 yards from where he stood. For a moment, Jake considered running. Then his scientific curiosity took over. He had always wondered if life existed elsewhere in the universe. Now it seemed he was about to find out. The craft's door opened with a soft hiss and 4 beings emerged. Jake's jaw dropped as he took in their appearance. The first was tall and thin with compound eyes and what looked like insect features. The second appeared to be made entirely of some kind of crystal that caught and reflected the sunlight. The third floated in what seemed to be a mechanical suit, while the fourth moved with jerky, uncertain steps. Jake stepped out from behind the large tree where he had been hiding. The aliens noticed him immediately, and he heard several sharp sounds that might have been their language. The tall insect-like being approached him slowly, holding what was obviously some kind of device. "Greetings," the device said in perfect English, though the voice sounded mechanical. "We are explorers from the Galactic Union. We mean you no harm." Jake raised his hands to show he wasn't armed. "I'm Jake Morrison. I'm a researcher studying the wildlife here." The crystal being stepped forward, her surface sparkling with excitement. "Fascinating. A primitive researcher studying even more primitive creatures. How wonderfully simple." Jake bristled slightly at being called primitive, but he kept his cool. "What brings you to Earth?" "We are conducting a biological survey," Captain Kethvar explained through his translator. "We study life forms across the galaxy. Your planet shows interesting diversity, though nothing particularly dangerous or advanced." "Dangerous?" Jake couldn't help but laugh. You picked one of the most dangerous places on Earth to land. This jungle is full of creatures that could kill you before you even knew they were there." The aliens exchanged what Jake assumed were amused glances. Dr. Zyftal consulted a handheld device. "Our scans indicate no significant threats in this area. The local predators are quite small and manageable." "Small?" Jake shook his head. "There's a black caiman in these waters that's over 20 feet long. The locals call it El Diablo. It's killed more people than I can count." Scout Vexthin's crystal body flickered with what might have been laughter. 20 feet? On our worlds, we have creatures that would consider such a beast a small snack. Surely you exaggerate. Jake realized these beings had no idea what they were dealing with. Despite their advanced technology, they seemed to have little understanding of how dangerous Earth's predators could be. "Look, I know you probably think I'm just some primitive human, but I'm telling you, this place is not safe. We should move to higher ground away from the water." "Unnecessary," Captain Kethvar decided. "We appreciate your concern, but we are well equipped to handle any local wildlife. Our weapons and defensive systems are far superior to anything this planet could produce." Jake looked at their equipment and had to admit it looked impressive. Still, something felt wrong. The jungle had gone too quiet. Birds that had been calling moments ago were now silent. Even the insects seemed to have stopped their constant buzzing. "We should really get out of here," Jake insisted. But the aliens were already unpacking their scientific equipment. Dr. Ziftal was particularly excited about the water samples she wanted to collect from the nearby swamp. "This will only take a few minutes," she assured everyone. "Then we can move on to catalog other species." As they set up their equipment near the dark water's edge, Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Something was watching them. He had spent enough time in dangerous places to trust his instincts, and right now every instinct was screaming at him to run. But he couldn't abandon these beings, no matter how arrogant they were. They had no idea what was coming for them. The alien team spread out along the muddy bank of the swamp, their advanced equipment humming quietly as they worked. Dr. Zyftal knelt at the water's edge, carefully collecting samples in small containers that glowed with their own internal light. Her crystal body reflected the dappled sunlight filtering through the canopy above. "Remarkable bacterial diversity," she murmured to herself, watching her scanner display. "The microbial life here is far more complex than our initial scans suggested." Captain Kethvar stood nearby, his compound eyes constantly scanning the area. Despite his confidence in their superior technology, he had not survived decades of space exploration by being careless. Still, this primitive world seemed peaceful enough. The greatest danger they had detected was some kind of large snake, and their personal shields could easily handle such simple threats. Scout Vexthin was perhaps 50 meters away, taking readings from various plants and insects. His crystal skin pulsed with excitement as he documented species after species that were completely new to galactic science. This was exactly the kind of discovery that could make his career. Coordinator Nal Weep floated above the group in his containment suit, monitoring their communications and keeping watch from his elevated position. As a gaseous being, he had excellent long-range perception, though the dense jungle limited even his abilities. Jake stayed close to the alien team, but his attention was focused on the environment around them. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The normal sounds of the jungle had not returned. It was as if every creature in the area was holding its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. "You need to pack up and leave," Jake said again, approaching Captain Kethvar. "I've spent months in this jungle and I've never seen it this quiet. Something big is nearby." The captain's mandibles clicked in what Jake was beginning to recognize as dismissive amusement. "Your concern is noted, but unnecessary. Our sensors would detect any large predator long before it could pose a threat. Perhaps your primitive senses are simply overwhelmed by our presence." Jake bit back an angry response. These beings might have advanced technology, but they clearly didn't understand predator behavior. He had seen soldiers with the best equipment in the world get killed because they relied too much on their gadgets and not enough on their instincts. Dr. Zyftal called out excitedly from the water's edge. "Captain, you must see this. The chemical composition of this water is extraordinary. There are compounds here that could revolutionize biotechnology across the galaxy." She leaned further over the water, trying to reach a particular sample that floated just beyond her grasp. Her scanner showed unusual concentrations of organic molecules in that exact spot. and her scientific curiosity overcame her caution. That was when Jake saw it, a pair of eyes just barely visible above the surface of the dark water, moving slowly toward the kneeling alien scientist. They were huge, easily the size of dinner plates, and they belonged to something that Jake knew could swallow a person whole. "Get away from the water," Jake shouted, but it was too late. El Diablo erupted from the swamp like a living nightmare. 22 feet of pure prehistoric fury, the massive black caiman launched itself out of the water with shocking speed. Its jaws, lined with teeth as long as a man's fingers, opened wide enough to engulf a small car. Dr. Zyftal barely had time to scream before those crushing jaws clamped down around her crystalline torso. The sound was horrible, like breaking glass mixed with grinding stone. Her crystal body began to crack under the immense pressure, as the beast's bite force exceeded 5,000 pounds per square inch. The caiman immediately began its death roll, a spinning maneuver designed to disorient prey and tear them apart. Dr. Zyftal's screams echoed through the jungle as she was dragged into the murky water, her body sparkling and cracking with each violent rotation. Captain Kethvar reached for his weapon, but the massive reptile was moving too fast and too close to his teammate. Any shot he fired might hit Dr. Zyftal instead of the beast. His compound eyes tracked the thrashing pair as they rolled deeper into the swamp. Scout Vex Thin stood frozen in terror, his crystal skin pulsing rapidly between different colors as his emotional state fluctuated wildly. He had never seen anything like this. The creature was bigger and more violent than anything in the galactic databases. How could such a primitive world produce something so terrifying? Coordinator Nalweep's gaseous form swirled frantically in his containment suit as he tried to get a clear sensor reading on the massive predator. "Impossible," his mechanical voice declared. "The bio readings are off the charts. This creature's muscle density and bone strength exceed theoretical maximums for carbon-based life." The aliens' advanced equipment was useless. Their sensors could analyze the beast, their computers could calculate its bite force, but none of their technology could save Dr. Zyftal from the primitive, brutal reality of a predator that had remained unchanged for millions of years. Jake watched the nightmare unfold and felt something deep inside him respond. He had seen friends die in combat zones, had watched good people get torn apart by forces beyond their control. The familiar rage began to build in his chest, the same fury that had carried him through the worst moments of his military service. The other aliens were paralyzed by shock and disbelief. Their worldview was crumbling as they realized that their advanced civilization meant nothing to a creature that operated on pure instinct and millions of years of evolution. They had encountered dangerous predators on other worlds, but those had been alien creatures that fought with energy weapons or toxic gases. This was something primal, something that killed with nothing but raw physical power. Dr. Zyftal's cries were getting weaker as her crystal body continued to fracture under the caiman's crushing bite. The beast had dragged her into deeper water now, where its powerful tail could add even more force to its rolling motion. Each spin sent spray flying in all directions, mixing water with the strange, colorful fluid that served as the alien's blood. "Do something," Scout Vex Thin finally managed to shout. "Your weapons, Captain. Use your weapons." Captain Kethvar raised his energy rifle, but his hands were shaking. The target was moving too erratically, spinning and thrashing in the water. If he missed, he might vaporize Dr. Zyftal instead of the creature attacking her. And even if he hit the beast, would their weapons be effective against something that primitive and tough? Time seemed to slow as Jake made his decision. While the aliens stood helpless, analyzing and debating and doubting, he acted on the same instincts that had kept humans alive on this dangerous world for hundreds of thousands of years. Without saying a word, Jake Morrison stripped off his backpack and ran toward the water. The aliens barely noticed as the human crashed through the reeds and dove into the swamp, heading straight for the massive killing machine that was destroying their teammate. In that moment, the aliens got their first real look at what humans were capable of when everything they cared about was on the line. They were about to witness something that would haunt their dreams and change their understanding of Earth's supposedly primitive inhabitants forever. The hunt was about to become something much more terrifying than anything El Diablo had ever experienced. Jake hit the water with a splash that sent ripples across the dark surface of the swamp. The murky liquid was warm and thick, filled with debris and the smell of rotting vegetation, but he barely noticed any of that. His entire focus was on the massive predator that was killing Dr. Zyftal just meters away. The black caiman was even bigger up close than it had appeared from shore. Its body was thick as a tree trunk, covered in armored scales that had deflected bullets and machete blades for decades. Its tail, nearly half the length of its total body, whipped through the water with enough force to break bones. Dr. Zyftal was barely conscious now, her crystal body dim and cracked. The caiman's teeth had punctured her in dozens of places, and the constant rolling motion was slowly tearing her apart. Her alien physiology was the only thing keeping her alive, but that wouldn't last much longer. Jake swam toward them with powerful strokes, using techniques he had learned in military training. The water was deeper than it looked, and the current from the caiman's thrashing made it difficult to maintain direction. But he kept pushing forward, driven by something that the aliens couldn't understand. Captain Kethvar watched from the shore in disbelief. "What is that primitive doing?" "He'll be killed instantly." "The human's bio readings are impossible," Coordinator Nalweep reported, his sensors locked onto Jake's rapidly approaching form. "His adrenaline levels would be fatal to most known species. His heart rate is beyond sustainable limits. How is he still functioning?" But Jake wasn't just functioning. He was operating at a level that millions of years of evolution had programmed into human DNA. Every ancestor who had faced down a predator, every generation that had survived by fighting instead of running, had passed their genetic memory to this moment. The caiman sensed the new threat and momentarily stopped its death roll. Its massive head swung toward Jake, and for an instant, predator and human stared at each other across the dark water. The beast's eyes were ancient and cold, showing no emotion except hunger and territorial rage. Jake didn't hesitate. Instead of swimming away like any rational creature would do, he dove directly at the caiman's head. His hands found the beast's eye sockets, and he drove his thumbs deep into the soft tissue with brutal precision. The caiman released Dr. Zyftal and let out a bellow that shook the trees. It tried to snap at Jake, but he was already moving, wrapping his arms around the creature's neck in a chokehold that his drill instructors would have been proud of. The aliens on shore watched in stunned silence as the human wrestled with a creature that their computers classified as a Class 5 predator. According to every biological model in their databases, what they were seeing was impossible. A primitive biped should have been torn apart in seconds. Jake locked his legs around the caiman's body just behind its front limbs, using his entire body weight to control the beast's movements. When it tried to roll, he rolled with it, maintaining his grip through pure determination and muscle memory from countless training exercises. His skeletal structure should have collapsed under that pressure. Scout Vex then whispered, his crystal skin flashing with colors that indicated extreme confusion. The G-forces from that spinning motion would crush most species. But humans had evolved from persistence hunters who could chase prey for days across African plains. Their bodies were designed to take punishment and keep functioning. Jake's bones were denser than the aliens realized, his joints more flexible, his muscle fibers tougher and more resilient. The caiman tried a different approach, whipping its massive tail around to club Jake in the back. The blow would have killed most creatures, but Jake absorbed it and used the momentum to shift his position. He wrapped one arm around the beast's throat while reaching for his belt with the other. From his utility pouch, Jake pulled out a folding knife with a 4-inch blade. It looked pathetically small compared to the massive predator he was fighting, but Jake knew exactly where to use it. He had studied anatomy in the military, had learned how to kill efficiently with minimal weapons. The caiman sensed the new threat and went into a frenzy, thrashing so violently that water exploded in all directions. But Jake held on, his grip tightening rather than loosening. He waited for the right moment, then drove the blade deep into the soft tissue just behind the creature's skull. Impossible, Dr. Zyftal gasped from where she floated nearby, her crystalline form badly damaged but still conscious. The human is attacking a predator that outweighs him by a factor of 10. This defies all known biological principles. Jake twisted the knife and felt warm blood flow over his hand. The caiman's movements became more desperate, more erratic. It rolled again, driving both of them toward the bottom of the swamp. But Jake's lungs were stronger than the aliens realized. Humans could hold their breath longer than most species, another gift from their evolutionary past. As they rolled underwater, Jake maintained his death grip on the massive reptile, His vision was starting to go red around the edges, not from lack of oxygen but from pure rage. This creature had hurt someone under his protection, and every instinct in his human DNA demanded that he destroy it completely. The caiman tried one last desperate move, opening its jaws wide and attempting to bite backwards at Jake's head. But the human was ready for it. He jammed his free arm into the creature's mouth, using his forearm to block the jaws from closing while he continued to work with the knife. The human's pain tolerance is beyond measurement, Coordinator Nal Weep reported, his voice filled with awe and terror. The creature's teeth are piercing his arm, but he's not releasing his hold. What kind of species fights through that level of damage? Jake could feel the caiman's teeth grinding against the bones in his forearm, but the pain only made him angrier. He had been shot, stabbed, and blown up during his military service, and he had learned that pain was just information. It told you that you were hurt, but it didn't tell you to quit. Using his superior position, Jake began to systematically destroy the creature that had nearly killed Dr. Zyftal. He worked the knife deeper into the caiman's neck, severing crucial arteries and nerve clusters. His military training had taught him how to kill efficiently, and now that knowledge was being applied to a prehistoric monster. The caiman's struggles became weaker, its movements less coordinated. Blood was clouding the water around them, mixing with the mud and debris from the swamp bottom. But Jake didn't stop. He kept cutting, kept applying pressure, kept fighting with a determination that the aliens had never seen in any species. Finally, after what felt like hours but had been only minutes, the massive predator went still. Jake held his position for several more seconds, making sure the threat was truly neutralized. Only then did he release his grip and swim toward the surface, dragging the lifeless bulk of El Diablo behind him. When his head broke the surface of the water, Jake gasped for air and looked around for Dr. Zyftal. The alien scientist was floating nearby, her crystal body dim and cracked but still functional. Jake swam over to her and carefully helped her toward shore. You killed it," she whispered in amazement. "You actually killed El Diablo." Jake didn't respond. He was focused on getting her to safety, on making sure the threat was completely eliminated. But inside, something primal and satisfied was telling him that he had done what humans had always done when faced with impossible odds. He had won. Jake dragged both Dr. Zyftal and the massive carcass of El Diablo toward the muddy shore. His clothes were torn to ribbons and blood flowed freely from dozens of puncture wounds where the caiman's teeth had found their mark. But he was alive, conscious, and still fighting. The three aliens on shore stood in complete silence as they watched the impossible scene unfold before them. Captain Kethvar's compound eyes tracked every movement, but his brain struggled to process what he was seeing. According to every piece of data in the Galactic Union's databases, what had just happened could not have occurred. "Status report," the captain finally managed to say to Coordinator Nal Weep. The gaseous being's mechanical voice trembled as he consulted his readings. "The human's vital signs are extraordinary. Multiple lacerations, significant blood loss, muscle strain that should have caused complete system failure. Yet he continues to function at peak efficiency." Scout Vexthin's crystal body pulsed with rapid color changes as his emotional systems tried to cope with what he had witnessed. The predator massed approximately 2,000 pounds. The human weighs perhaps 1/10 of that. The physics alone should have made victory impossible. Jake reached the shore and carefully lifted Dr. Zyftal out of the water. Her crystal form was badly cracked, with several pieces missing entirely, but her internal light still flickered with life. He set her down gently on a patch of dry ground and began examining her injuries with the same calm efficiency he had shown in combat. "Can you understand me?" Jake asked, looking into what he hoped were her eyes. Dr. Zyftal's voice was weak but clear. "Yes, your language translation is still functioning. I do not understand how you survived that encounter." Jake was already pulling supplies from his backpack. Field medic training had been part of his military service, and while he had never treated a crystalline alien before, the basic principles of trauma care were universal. Stop the bleeding, stabilize the patient, prevent shock. "Don't try to move," Jake instructed as he began applying pressure to her worst cracks. "I don't know your physiology, but these look like major structural damage." Captain Kethvar approached slowly, his weapon still in his hands but pointed at the ground. His entire worldview had been shattered in the space of a few minutes. "Human Jake Morrison," he said formally, "we owe you a debt that cannot be measured." Jake glanced up from his patient. Just Jake is fine. And you don't owe me anything. This is what people do when someone's in trouble. No, the captain replied, his mandibles clicking rapidly. This is not what people do. This is what warriors do. This is what apex predators do when defending their pack. Scout Vexithin stepped closer, his crystal skin now pulsing with what appeared to be reverence. I have studied predator behavior across dozens of worlds. What you just accomplished should not be possible for a carbon-based biped of your mass and apparent physical capabilities. Jake continued working on Dr. Zyftal's injuries while he talked. Where I come from, we call it being stubborn. Sometimes you just can't afford to lose. Stubborn, Coordinator Nalweep repeated, his mechanical voice giving the word an odd inflection. Your species' capacity for persistence hunting is noted in our preliminary scans. But this was not persistence. This was direct confrontation with a superior predator resulting in complete victory. Superior? Jake looked up from his work, and for the first time, the alien saw something in his eyes that made them step back involuntarily. It was the look of a predator that had just proven its dominance. That thing was big and mean, but it was just an animal. Animals are predictable. They follow their programming. Dr. Zyftal's internal light flickered brighter as Jake's first aid took effect. What programming do humans follow? Jake thought about that for a moment as he checked her pulse, or what he assumed was her pulse. Survive. Protect the pack. Never give up. Same as everything else, I guess, but we're really good at it. Captain Kethavar was running continuous scans on Jake with his handheld device. The readings were unlike anything in their databases. Your adrenaline levels are still elevated beyond what should be sustainable. Your pain responses appear to be partially suppressed. How are you still conscious? Training, Jake replied simply, and maybe stubbornness. But the aliens were beginning to understand that there was more to it than that. Their sensors were detecting physiological adaptations that spoke of millions of years of evolution on a death world. Humans weren't just smart apes who had learned to use tools. They were persistence hunters who had evolved to chase down prey across vast distances, to fight when cornered, to survive injuries that would kill most species. This changes everything, Scout Vexthin whispered, his crystal form now glowing with what the others recognized as scientific excitement. The preliminary classification of this species will need to be completely revised. Jake had finished his emergency treatment of Dr. Zyftal and was now examining his own wounds. Most were superficial, though the bite marks on his forearm would need proper medical attention. He pulled a first aid kit from his pack and began cleaning the worst cuts. What classification did you give us? Jake asked as he wrapped a bandage around his arm. The aliens exchanged glances that somehow managed to convey embarrassment, despite their completely non-human features. Captain Kethavar finally answered. Primitive bipedal mammals, non-threatening, suitable for standard diplomatic contact protocols. Jake laughed, a sound that made all three aliens flinch. It wasn't a cruel laugh, but there was something in it that spoke of predators in dark places and things that hunted in the night. You might want to update that file, Jake suggested. We're not as primitive as we look. Dr. Zyftal struggled to sit up, her damaged crystal body sparkling in the filtered sunlight. The creature you killed. How did you know where to attack it? Anatomy, Jake replied. All vertebrates have similar weak points. You go for the eyes, the throat, the major arteries. Basic military training. Military training, Captain Kethavar repeated. You have studied warfare? I was a soldier before I became a researcher. Most humans have some kind of combat training, either formal or informal. We've been fighting things that wanted to kill us for a very long time. The implications of that statement sent chills through the alien team. They came from species that had evolved past the need for individual combat. Their wars were fought with advanced technology, energy weapons, and computer-guided systems. The idea of a species where individual members were trained to kill with their bare hands was both fascinating and terrifying. Coordinator Nalweep floated closer, his gaseous form swirling with what might have been curiosity. What other capabilities do humans possess that we should be aware of? Jake finished bandaging his wounds and looked at the massive carcass of El Diablo floating in the water nearby. Well, that wasn't even one of our bigger predators. And I'm just a researcher now. If you really want to know what humans can do, you should probably talk to someone who's still active military. The alien spent the next several minutes in hushed conversation, using their own language while their translation devices remained switched off. Jake couldn't understand the words, but their body language was easy enough to read. They were scared, excited, and completely reassessing everything they thought they knew about Earth and its inhabitants. Finally, Captain Kethavar approached Jake again. "We must return to our ship and file a report with the Galactic Union. This encounter has provided data that will change how we approach contact with your species." "Good," Jake replied. "Because if you keep underestimating us, someone's going to get hurt." As they prepared to leave, Dr. Uziftal managed to stand with help from her teammates. Her crystal body was still badly damaged, but the emergency treatment had stabilized her condition. "Thank you," she said to Jake. "You saved my life." Jake nodded. "Just remember that the next time someone tells you Earth is a safe place to visit, the aliens had learned their lesson. Earth wasn't a primitive backwater filled with harmless creatures. It was a death world that had produced something far more dangerous than any predator they had ever encountered. It had produced humans." 3 hours later, Jake sat on a fallen log near his research camp, carefully cleaning and checking his equipment. His wounds had been properly bandaged, and while he was sore and tired, he felt oddly satisfied. El Diablo had been terrorizing this region for years, and now that threat was gone. The local villagers would be able to fish and travel the river safely again. The aliens had departed an hour ago, their shuttle rising silently through the canopy and disappearing into the blue sky above. But before they left, they had spent considerable time asking Jake questions about human physiology, military training, and Earth's other predators. Their scientific curiosity had overcome their fear, though Jake could tell they were still deeply shaken by what they had witnessed. High above Earth's atmosphere, aboard the research vessel Nexus Dawn, Captain Kethavar stood before the main communication console, trying to decide how to phrase his report to Galactic Union Command. The standard survey forms had no categories for what they had discovered. "Captain," Dr. Uziftal called from the medical bay where she was undergoing emergency repairs. "Have you reviewed the bioscan data from the human?" Kethavar activated his personal display and scrolled through the readings their sensors had collected during Jake's fight with the Cayman. The numbers were staggering. Bone density nearly twice what they had expected, muscle fiber composition that allowed for explosive strength, well beyond their initial calculations, a cardiovascular system designed for both endurance and high-intensity activity. According to these readings, Scout Vestan said, reviewing the data from his workstation, humans are not primitive at all. They're highly specialized predators adapted for persistence hunting and combat survival. Coordinator Null Weep's gaseous form swirled thoughtfully in his containment suit. The human Jake Morrison mentioned that he was trained for military service. If their entire species receives combat instruction, we may be looking at a planet-wide warrior culture. That thought sent chills through the alien crew. They came from civilizations that had evolved past individual violence. Their conflicts were rare and typically resolved through negotiation or technological superiority. The idea of an entire species trained from childhood to fight and kill was both fascinating and terrifying. "There's more," Dr. Uziftal added, her voice still weak but excited. "I analyzed the chemical traces from the human's blood during the combat scenario. His body was producing compounds that we've never seen before, natural painkillers, strength enhancers, and what appears to be a substance that actually improves his reaction time under stress." Captain Kethavar clicked his mandibles nervously. "You're describing a biological combat enhancement system." "Exactly. And it appears to be completely natural, activated automatically during high-stress situations. The humans have evolved their own internal military technology." Scout Vestan looked up from his data analysis. "Captain, I've been reviewing our database of galactic predators. Based on what we observed today, humans would rank in the top 5% of dangerous species we've encountered. And that's just considering a single individual with minimal equipment." The implications were staggering. The Galactic Union had protocols for dealing with dangerous species, but those typically involved advanced technology or exotic physical capabilities. They had never encountered a species that was dangerous simply because of superior evolution and natural fighting ability. "What about their technology level?" Coordinator Nalweep asked. "The human mentioned that Earth has military organizations. If they can produce warriors like Jake Morrison using primitive training methods, what happens when they develop advanced weapons?" That question hung in the air like a dark cloud. The aliens had observed human technology during their orbital surveys, and while it was primitive by galactic standards, it was advancing rapidly. A species that could produce individual fighters capable of killing massive predators with minimal equipment would be absolutely devastating once they gained access to energy weapons and spacecraft. Captain Kethvar made his decision. Open a priority channel to Galactic Union Command. Maximum encryption. The communication system activated, and soon the face of Admiral Korath appeared on the main screen. The Admiral was a Valdorian like Dr. Zaftel, but much older and more experienced. His crystal form had the deep blue coloration that came with age and wisdom. Captain Kethvar. The Admiral's voice resonated through the ship's speakers. Your survey report is overdue. What is your status? Admiral, I'm filing an immediate reclassification request for the planet designated Earth 317. The initial survey data was inadequate. Admiral Korath's crystal form flickered with the equivalent of a frown. Explain. For the next 30 minutes, Captain Kethvar described their encounter with Jake Morrison and the massive predator he had killed. He showed the bioscan data, the combat footage their sensors had recorded, and Dr. Zaftel's analysis of human physiology. When he finished, Admiral Korath was silent for a long moment. Finally, the old alien spoke. Captain, are you requesting that I believe a primitive biped killed a Class 5 predator, using nothing but determination and a small blade? I am requesting that you review the data, Admiral, and I am strongly recommending that Earth be reclassified as a restricted world pending further study. Admiral Korath studied the information for several minutes, his ancient mind processing the implications. Finally, he nodded. Your recommendation is accepted. Earth is hereby classified as a Watch World Level 7. No further contact without specific authorization from High Command. And the diplomatic protocols, Admiral? Suspended indefinitely. If this data is accurate, humans are not a primitive species we can easily integrate into the Galactic Union. They are something else entirely. After the communication ended, Captain Kethvar gathered his crew in the main briefing room. Despite their exhaustion and shock, they needed to discuss what they had learned. The question, he began, is whether humans like Jake Morrison are exceptional individuals, or representative of their species as a whole. Dr. Zaftel's crystal form pulsed weakly as she spoke from her repair platform. From our conversations with him, I believe he considered his actions to be normal human behavior. He seemed surprised that we found it remarkable. He also mentioned that he was no longer active military. Scout Vestan added. He implied that there are humans with significantly more advanced combat training. Coordinator Nalweep's gaseous form swirled with what they all recognized as deep concern. If Jake Morrison represents an average human civilian, what are their soldiers like? That question would haunt the alien crew for the rest of their lives. They had encountered a species that could produce individual warriors, capable of feats that defied galactic understanding of biology and physics. And they had done it not through technology or genetic engineering, but through millions of years of evolution on a world that demanded absolute toughness to survive. Back on Earth, Jake had finished securing his equipment and was preparing to hike back to the nearest village. He would need to report the death of El Diablo to the local authorities, and his wounds required proper medical attention. But first, he took one last look at the carcass of the massive caiman floating in the dark water. The beast had been a terror for years, killing and maiming anyone unlucky enough to encounter it. Now it was just meat and bones defeated by someone who was, by human standards, nothing special. Just a former soldier turned researcher who had refused to let innocent people get hurt on his watch. Jake shouldered his pack and began the long walk back to civilization, unaware that his actions had just announced humanity's presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible. The aliens who had witnessed his victory would carry the memory of it for the rest of their lives, and their reports would eventually reach every corner of galactic civilization. Earth was no longer an unknown backwater planet. It was now a world of warriors, a place where apex predators walked upright and called themselves human, and the galaxy would never be the same. As Jake disappeared into the jungle, heading home to write his research reports and tend his wounds, he had no idea that he had just changed the course of galactic history. To him, He had simply done what any decent person would do when faced with a situation where someone needed help. But to the aliens who had watched him tear apart a massive predator with his bare hands, Jake Morrison had become something far more significant. He had become humanity's first ambassador to the stars, and his message was simple. Humans were not prey. They were something far more dangerous.